Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I'm John Isaac. I'm from India. I came about 50 years ago, and I don't think I could do that today because I had a visitor's visa, and I pretty much bunked. I stayed here, and somehow I was very lucky, and I wanted to be a folk singer, so that's why I came to New York, and I wanted to be in New York City. And while I was singing one day, this lady came and she said, "You have a pretty good voice. I work at the UN. Do you have a job?" I said, "No, actually, my visa is expiring in another 2 weeks." So she asked me to come and sing in front of the choir master at the UN Singers. And I got the part, and she got me a job as a messenger to carry mail from one floor to the other. And then I entered a photo contest. I won the grand prize. And then the photo department said, "Will you come and work in our photo department as a darkroom technician?" And that's how I started my photography. And I'm here for 50 years. I'm an American now, and I'm very proud. So this is part of my work, and I want to show you the way I see. It's not any different from any of you, but I want to encourage all of you to look at things a little differently and also follow your passion, what you want to do. So photography is a passion, and I'm going to start with my first image, which is tigers. I took this 2 weeks ago in India, and I just turned 76, and I think I should slow down because on the last day, 10th day, I could not even go to the field because it's very tiring. You have to get in a Jeep at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 hours, you're on a bumpy road. So I realized from now on I have to slow down. So I'm going to show more of my tiger pictures later. This is Kashmir. I wanted to talk about the problems that Kashmiris are having. It's one of the most beautiful, picturesque state in India. And right now they're going through a little bit of turmoil because of terrorism and all of it. But in all these pictures, I wanted to show you how beautiful this place is. It's very serene. Here's a guy selling flowers early in the morning. A lot of times we hesitate to photograph in the fog or rain, adverse condition. But you'll see that in adverse conditions when you get some beautiful shot. This is after the sun had set. There's like a little bit of an evening glow. And sometimes you wait and you do your composition. And that's what I'm saying, like you all develop your own little style. I mean, I never had a style. I never went to a school to study photography. But when I was studying in India, my Bachelor of Science degree, I went to an art school at night and I learned a little bit about watercolor painting. So I'm a frustrated watercolor artist who's trying to transcribe that into my photography. So all of what you're seeing now is Kashmir. I just wanted to show you how pristine and beautiful this state is. And even though there were a lot of problems during the time I was photographing, but today there's a book I did. It's called the Vale of Kashmir. It's still available. You can buy it. And it's all about Kashmir. I wanted to show the good side of Kashmir. And every morning I used to take a little boat like this and follow people, photograph. And it's a very different perspective because you're not in land, you're in water. And what they are doing here is that they are fixing the price early morning, just like Wall Street. But they're pretty honest, so they keep to the promise how much they'll sell, fruits, flowers, whatever. And I think the Kashmiri craft is incredible. It's like heirloom. You can, sometimes it'll take an artist for a whole year to finish a shawl, and the embroidery is beautiful, and they use very fine wool. This is a view from my houseboat one morning, and this lady is going to the market to sell her produce that she had from her farm. And sometimes you have to look at a different angle. Here I climbed a mountain and I used a long lens to get this image. Sometimes long lenses give you a different perspective as opposed to wide lenses that you see close. Now I'm going to take you to Antelope Canyon in Arizona in the US. And if you haven't been there, take a trip. It's really worth going down. You just have to, it's not a very bad climb. You can climb down. And then it's a slot canyon. And then you'll see the lights coming through. And it's actually spectacular. It's almost like a cathedral or like an altar. And a lot of times I go sit there, I meditate, because it's so amazing. And here's the light beam coming through. Here's another one. If you haven't been there, it's an amazing place to go and photograph. Something about landforms, it's always interested me. Then I took a trip to Namibia, where the sand dunes in a place called Sousasvlei. When I worked for the UN as a photojournalist for 20 years, I covered Namibia's independence, so I always had an interest to go back. So these pictures I'm showing you, I went back after I left the UN, and I did a whole series about these dunes. They are about 300 to 400 feet high, and with the wind, they shift. So the lines are not the same. If you go 1 year after, it'll change. Sometimes putting a dead tree in the middle, and then you show the shapes. So this is how I like to compose, because I didn't go to a formal school to study photography. I'm just winging it as I see it every day. Even today when I came early, I was looking at stuff right here, and I was thinking of how I would photograph. So this is how I work my photography. And for me, coming to America was my dream. So when I came here, I was in awe of everything, that everything was big. It took me a while to blend in, but my wife is an American. She worked for Time magazine as a writer, and we've been married. Next year it'll be 50 years, so I'm very proud of that too. So unfortunately, she couldn't come today. She was anxious to come, but she's seen this many times. So, and the other thing, when you are doing like a vast, like a 300 feet high, 400 feet, a monumental thing, you want to put something for scale. So the trees are for scale. You see how big the dunes are as opposed to the trees. And here I waited for a while to see a little springbuck. And so it gives you the scale of how big that is. Now I'm taking you to India, to a place called Varanasi. It's the holiest place for the Hindus. The river Ganges flows through that. And people believe, the Hindus believe, if you die and you're cremated in Varanasi and your ashes are thrown in the river, you'll go to heaven. But I'm not an expert on night photography, but the fireworks were going. It's a very big festival. So I went across the river and I shot this with a 840 millimeter lens. So you see all the people like little ants, the black figures. So sometimes using a long lens is good, and also night photography is pretty dramatic, and they're all lighting their little lamps, and they float that in the river. And here's a portrait of a little girl who had come with her family to the festival. I like to use regular light, not artificial light like flash or strobes. Even when I worked at the UN, very seldom I did portraits with bright lights. Window light is such a nice thing, and we should experiment, just like the Dutch painters. That's what they did. Here is another picture of early morning, 5:36. The ladies are lighting lamps, and they float that in the river. When I was there for this festival, there were 100 million people in this one little town. I'm talking about, India, we are over 1 billion people, and there is no family planning, and it's like free for all. In some ways, I feel so sad that we are not using birth control, and it's a big problem. It's been a problem, but nobody's paying attention to it. India is a beautiful place to visit, and I grew up there. 25 years I spent. For all that I missed, I go back almost every year to photograph the festivals or little activities, and that's why I want to show you. Here's a mass crowd celebrating in the morning, and here are the pilgrims who have come there, are drying their saris, because these ladies have only 2 saris in their possession, and they are there for a week for this festival. So what they do is they alternate. One day they wear a sari, the next day they wash that, and the other one. So they all help each other, and sometimes it's a beautiful sight. Photography is basically light and shadow. That's what it is. So sometimes I'm intrigued by a picture like this, where you see a layer of sari drying, another layer in the back, then there's shadows. And these are the little things that attracts me. Here is the festival. These are the Naga yogis. They are being initiated in the sacred river Ganges. And it's spectacular. Every morning, I took a group of photographers who wanted to come and photograph India during festival time. So they still write to me, it was one of the most spectacular things that they had witnessed, just to see 100 million people in one little area. These are the Naga yogis. They are totally naked. They grow their beard, hair, and they don't wear any clothes, and they worship Lord Shiva, who they believe is the creator of the world. Now I'm going to show you something a little different, more colorful of India, which is another festival called Holi, where they throw color dyes on each other, and I got soaked in water, plus my camera got ruined. They threw all the paint on my camera too. So I decided to go the next year and sit on a tree and photograph. So I had a different vantage point. All these pictures are from a high. They couldn't get me, so I was high enough. And after they all moved, I got down. I used Olympus cameras because I find that it's much lighter, and it's a 4/3 system. I started with a 2.1 megapixel camera. Today, they are 20 megapixel, and they are fine for me. And I think if any of you are deciding to go into a new system, go and try and take a look at it, because their lenses are really sharp, and they've come out with a new line of lenses. And a 600 millimeter lens is only this big, and it's f4, and it takes the sharpest pictures. And here, all what you saw just now is Holi. And this is the India's Republic Day parade. When I'm talking about art of seeing, this is a nice picture. Then quickly I thought, okay, let me try and use the zoom and do a close-up of the head. And this is the best picture for me, because you see so many portraits in one frame, and a longer lens flattens everything, and make sure that you have enough depth of field. When you use a long lens, sometimes shallow depth of field is nice. Sometimes you want to have everything in focus, so you have to make sure you have enough light, and you can still handhold it and shoot it. So Some of the pictures I'm going to show you later will be taken with a 800 millimeter focal length or 840 millimeter focal length. This is Brahmaputra River, again up in the northern part of India, near the Himalayan mountains. And here it's the layers of the mountains that makes this picture. So in the morning you will see it, and I've seen it here too in different places, Grand Canyon and other places. You have the mountains, in different distance. So you'll have early morning, late evening, you'll get something like this. Now I'm showing you something about an environmental portrait. He's just like us, but he has got a different headgear, brass pipe. This is in a place called Nagaland, also way up in the north. And I wanted to show you a little bit of India because sometimes people get scared to go to a strange place. India is a very friendly place. People are very friendly. They'll come, they'll want you to take their pictures. And so you should have this experience. This is Leh in Ladakh. Ladakh is also a Himalayan mountain area where from Kashmir you can go up north, drive up to Leh and Ladakh, and you'll see some amazing scenes. This is again Ladakh. All of this area I'm talking about is spectacular. You have to go and see it, witness it, put it in your bucket list, But in some ways, when I worked at the UN, I traveled to more than 140 countries, and then I stopped writing because I covered most of the wars, refugees, problems, and after Rwanda, I had a nervous breakdown. So after that, I started working with nature, wildlife. I retired 20 years ago, and my wife is saying, but you're still traveling, when are you going to quit? So I don't think I can quit. So sometimes you want to use something in your foreground and shoot through it. This picture is nice because I shot this through the flags, and but make sure you have enough depth of field to have all the buildings in the back is also sharp. This is again Leh, Ladakh. I took this with a 400 millimeter focal length, I think. Late evening, the sun had set, and there's still that afterglow. Again, same place. 2 years ago, the Chinese government invited me to come and speak in Beijing to college kids and also talk about photography. And after I finished my 3 presentations, they asked me, where do you want to go? I said, I'd like to go to this Rainbow Mountains that I hear about. I forgot the place, actually, the name, but if you put Rainbow Mountain, China in Google, you'll see this is the way it is. The colors are real. I didn't enhance anything except for just working on Photoshop. I got my computer when I was 56, so my computer knowledge is very limited. So even when I teach photography course, I teach people the way I learned, I didn't go and study Photoshop from anybody, except when Adobe saw my work, they invited me to come and speak to them one time, and then they actually invited me to go and beta test Lightroom when it came out in 2002 or 3. Again, you see different layers of mountains. It's not a wide angle, it's a medium long lens, but you make, this one I took it, I had a tripod because it wasn't a bright day, but I made it bright just in Photoshop, enhancing. Photoshop is an amazing tool. I want all of you, you don't have to learn a lot of things. When people show you, they'll show 50 million things and it'll confuse you. I use only 5 moves. I know how to do layers, I know how to correct the colors, and then I know how to sharpen the picture. That's all. You don't need too many things. And sometimes you don't have to go to a foreign country. This is in Bronxville where I live, just a lake, and it's a reflection of the tree, and the fall foliage had fallen and the leaves are floating. So my new discovery is going to places where people don't go and see something different and photograph. This is my best-selling work, my new abstract. This is in a slate mine. I know that slate has iron ores, so after the rain, if you go to a slate mine or wherever there are slates, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania has some slate mines. That's where I go. And you see all these rust coming out in colors after the rain. This is in the botanical garden. It's a Chinese tree, barks, and they look like scrolls to me. And the way I shot it, I used a 600 millimeter lens, went far enough, and sort of compressed 3 or 4 different branches into one. But I don't manipulate in Photoshop. These are all straight photographs because I was a photojournalist where we were not allowed to do any kind of manipulation like that. Again, it's an old rust on a steel sheet and peeling paint. And sometimes when you go to old buildings, you'll get photographs like this. This is a different way of seeing a landscape. It's pastel, muted colors, and I used a long lens. And again, it was a late evening, and there was very little light, and I shot this with a very high ISO. Today, all the cameras have very good settings, and you can clean up the ISO. They also have software to improve it. You can remove the grain. And here what I did, I just moved my camera in a tripod, and I used the stabilizer for horizontal, and I moved the camera up, so all the trees were slightly blurred. So that's a trick to this. So it's not something great, but you can. And again, the fish came up just for a few seconds, and it was a bright day, and the water was jet black. It's a tank, and the buildings are reflecting. So that few seconds, you make a picture, and then you clean it up in Photoshop, and it looks different. This is in Maine, and the only living part in this is the duck that's swimming. The rest is a reflection. So that's how you have this little design that the duck was forming as he was moving, or she. This I took in Japan, near Mount Fuji. We were with several photographers who came with the Olympus group, and they were all using wide-angle lenses to shoot. It's a cascade of waterfalls, many waterfalls all around. And I said, maybe I'll use a long lens and just choose one little segment of the waterfall. So I walked around and saw which segment I wanted to shoot. And I like this. I've sold this many times. It's used in some ads. So sometimes you have to think a little differently. And also, as I'm getting older, I'm trying to reinvent myself because I don't want to be the same one-trick pony, So I'm trying to figure out what other way I'll discover something different. This is Death Valley in the West Coast. After I retired, I started traveling in the U.S. If you haven't been to the canyons, I mean, it's a must. If I was the president of America, I will give some kind of a funding for every family to go and see how beautiful the canyons are. I mean, it's like one day I got up, I saw the sun clipping every mountaintop. I started to cry because I was so happy. This is probably one of the photographs I set up. I saw the scene where I live in Bronxville. 2 years ago, we had a heavy snow. I asked my wife, will you walk down with a red umbrella? And she said yes. And this, I set it up, I must say. And here it's a wall. And what makes this picture is a dilapidated old wall. There's a shadow of a tree. And that's what it is. And one winter, I went to Yellowstone. These are my nude figures that I saw. Well, pretty exciting, right? Yeah. And here's a country that I want all of you to go, is Iceland. It is one of the most spectacular places that I've been to because I can't even describe. I thought I landed in Moon. This is the Black Sea sand, and then the water coming in. I took it from a high vantage point with a long lens when the white froth was coming down. Then I was so tempted to go back. I went in the winter when it was freezing cold. All the waterfalls and everything was just frozen, and I got different kind of pictures. And they have big eruptions in the sea, and many people, tourists, get drowned in that. And they say that it's the biggest problem with tourists. They don't understand how fast the water can come in. You know, they have low tides and high tides. And even though there are signs, they said every year few tourists go, and they don't realize. I shot this with a long lens. I wasn't going to go anywhere close to that. Look at this scene. There's sky, there's a piece of land with snow, then there's water, then there is another piece. It almost looks like the middle piece of land is floating in the sky. So this is what I'm trying to tell you, encouraging you to look at things in a different way. One time a little kid, 10-year-old kid, told me, Uncle John, you take a picture and you go, you do that, and then you walk away. Have you ever gone to the other side to see what is there? And he was so right. Sometimes your picture is on the other side. So I learned that from a little 10-year-old kid. Again, this is Iceland. Keep that in your bucket list because they love Americans. That's what they said. They're very friendly people, and it's amazing. These are waterfalls, and of course, I didn't want to shoot the waterfall the way most people do. I wanted to get a close-up, and I see things in it, you know. So when I say I see things, my wife always thinks I'm a little crazy, you know. So she says, yeah. And this is the Blue Lagoon. You see glaciers. So Iceland is a pretty easy setup because it's just a short distance, you know. I think 5 hours or 6 hours we'll be there. And again, the ocean. And here is the waterfall again. I just wanted the two birds to offset to show the scale, how big the waterfall is. This is a picture from Cambodia. I wanted to include this. Not a digital, it's a film photograph. I spent some time during Pol Pot when he was killing 1.5 million people. I was in the border documenting. Then later I went for the UN when they had the election when Pol Pot was removed. And this was where in the pond, the driver told me many dead bodies were buried. And then I saw this little girl. It's a lotus pond now. She's bringing flowers to sell it in the market. So to me, this was a symbol of hope. Even in bad things, you can see good things. Everybody tells you you can never make a good picture in the midday light. And I shot this at midday noon. They are winnowing rice. And the rice looks like little gold particles. Only in a midday you can shoot this. So you learn the rules and you break the rules. New York City, from Kosciuszko Bridge, I won an award for this, but I almost got a ticket. I told my wife to stop the car when we were on the bridge, and the cop was right behind us. But luckily, he didn't give us a ticket. So here, this is in Switzerland, in Nyon. I shot this with an 840 focal length, and you see the trees in the foreground. 4 different villages are compressed into one. It's almost like 4 different photographs in one photograph. So sometimes experiment with long lenses and photograph. I'm taking you to Bhutan now, another Himalayan mountain kingdom. Beautiful place. A little expensive because the Bhutanese government wants you to stay in their lodges, and they charge you a pretty high price. But it's worth going and seeing because they are very different people, and their culture, very soft-spoken, mostly Buddhist. And then they have dragon dancers and all of that. And the monks, they have cell phones, they have SLR cameras, and so sometimes this makes it interesting when you capture something like that. So always when you travel, keep looking at different things. Little things, nothing important, not the monument. Maybe the great picture is in a simple picture like this. The 3 monks are exchanging their emails or whatever they're doing, you know. So, and here is a dragon dance they're performing. Can anybody guess what this is? These are coffee beans drying, what they call barbecuing coffee beans before they grind it, you know. This is in India. This is the picture I wanted to show you of Afghan refugees. They are behind the carpet. They are weaving carpet. I did the story about child labor for UNICEF, but this is one of my favorite pictures because you can still see a part of the silhouette of the people. This is an Amish farmer that I took in 1971. I won an award for this. And I love horses, and this is a friend's farm with where she has thoroughbred horses, especially when they are moving. And also remember, when you have animals, when you're photographing people, you have to have all the faces. For me, what intrigued my sense to photograph this is the way they're all scattered and they were grazing. So I made sure that all the faces that you can see, and that's the important thing. And this is in the West Coast, Los Angeles, Venice Beach. Yeah, history is myth, yeah. And that little lady in the window makes this picture. So I shouldn't take credit for this picture. It's the artist who drew this beautiful drawing on a wall. This is probably my all-time favorite photo that I did in Morocco since I studied a little bit of painting. This reminded me of some of the old paintings that they did. And it's called Fantasia. They ride their horses, fire their guns in unison. And Morocco is another great place. If you stick around with me, I'll say every place I've been is a great place. Now I want to show you a little bit of birds and how they are building their nest, the great blues. So the male brings the branch, the female reaches out, and then she tucks it in. Then he gets a reward. Birds are absolutely beautiful to photograph and to look at. A lot of times I just look at them and observe, because this is in Bosque in New Mexico, Bosque del Apache, yeah, where the sandhill cranes come there. And it's also a beautiful scenery, and you could do a lot of great pictures. This is probably my favorite picture of birds. I waited 3.5 hours on my knees in Maine in a little cubicle to get the shot because I saw the first and I missed it. Then I sat there for 3 hours for another bird to come sit with a full catch. This is in Masai Mara. Look at how many chicks she has. And ostrich eggs are this big, you know. Flight photography is very intriguing, and I like to do flight photography. One time I went to Alaska after I became an American just to photograph the eagles, and I have lots of pictures. I just want to show you a couple because I've been photographing for 50 years. Out of that, maybe professionally 40 years, I would say. Wood ducks are absolutely gorgeous, and the colors they have. And sometimes when you isolate and shoot with the long lens, it's beautiful. These are the cranes in Hokkaido in Japan. They are red-crested cranes. The Japanese almost worship them, you know. Cranes are very evolved birds, you know. They have only one partner in their life. And they also do this amazing dance, you know. This is a family dancing. The brown-headed one is the chick. She's probably a year and a half old. If you haven't been to Bosque della Pace, this is in Japan I'm talking, this is in Bosque della Pace. You can watch them and you can see them dance. It's really glorious. I'm even thinking of doing a series of ballet dances and juxtaposition with this crane dances. This is a friend of mine became very rich. He went into banking. He didn't become a photographer. So when he bought a yacht, he said, "Johnny, you want to come? I'm going to North Pole." So I went with him to North Pole. So I was very lucky. I got some pictures. And this is the grizzly in Katmai in Alaska. Another great place to go and photograph the grizzlies. And it's amazing how they catch the fish just with a bare mouth, you know. Sometimes a slow shutter speed helps to show the water flowing, and then you have to make sure the bear is a little still. Here again, there's a grizzly. And now I'm going to show you a few of my favorite tigers. This is from 2 weeks ago. This is a few years ago, mother with 3 cubs. Because I like cats. My house cat, I lost my cat a year and a half ago. I'm still waiting. I don't want to even show the picture because I'll start crying. So that's why I started going to the jungle and spend time photograph the tiger. They are 500 pounds, and we are killing them slowly by population. And when they kill a tiger and take it to China, a body is worth $1 million. So a poor farmer in India will poison a tiger or trap him for $25. And there's a mafia in Delhi. And it's a hard fight. Even ministers and their sons are involved in some of these trafficking. So I'm trying to work with small groups and trying to make this aware. So I donate my pictures to people making posters and telling people not to kill tigers, you know. They are very swift and fast, and they do in 2 seconds, they will take a deer. And especially if it's a mother, and if she has full-grown 2 or 3 cubs, she has to feed them almost every other day, and she has to make a kill. A lot of times she'll wait all night or late evening, and she'll make a kill. And sometimes I've seen the mother drag the kill almost a kilometer, a big deer for her 4 little cubs. These are 2 brothers. They are very affectionate. They are playful. They hug each other, and they like to swim. Our last cat we got was a Bengal cat, and they bred that with the Asian leopard cat, and they love to swim. We didn't know. when I got the cat, they both jumped into the bathtub with me, so we were surprised. So, yeah, he's shaking off the water. A mother-daughter spat. The mother is angry because it's a female. She knows that this female is going to go against her because a female needs 9 square kilometers for herself, and they won't let any other female come, even their own cub. So she knew, because I was asking the naturalist, he told me that that's why she's angry. Here, 2 cubs are playing. Imagine her, 4 cubs this size to feed when they are hungry, because they cannot hunt until they are 2 years old. As you can see, I'm very partial to tigers. I even wore a tiger shirt today, just for that. Yeah. Make a trip to India while we still have the tigers, because it's an unbelievable sight when you see these big, here she's with, and they love to rub their face with a mother, They always want to be close, each one, and they get jealous. And before I finish, I want to leave you with a proverb my mother taught me when I was a young boy. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the realities and principles of existence, the bliss of growth, the splendor of action, the power of glory. Yesterday was just a dream, and tomorrow's only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you.